Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Tonight, we are going to begin with a simple question. Can the moon, quietly hanging above the Earth, change the way humans sleep? Some research suggests it might, at least a little. In one controlled sleep study, researchers found that around the time of a full moon, people took slightly longer to fall asleep. On average, it was about 5 minutes longer, and participants slept about 20 minutes less overall. Their deep sleep was also reduced. What made the result especially interesting is that the volunteers were inside a sleep laboratory and could not see the moon. They also did not know what lunar phase was happening outside. At first, that sounds surprising. But when scientists think about sleep, they often start with a simple rule. The body responds strongly to light and darkness. Even small differences in nighttime brightness can change how the body understands the arrival of night. And the moon, although it looks bright in the sky, is actually very gentle light. On a clear night, a full moon produces only about a quarter of a lux of illumination. For comparison, daylight can reach around 100,000 lux. In other words, sunlight is hundreds of thousands of times brighter than moonlight. Yet the human visual system is very sensitive in darkness. When the eyes adjust to night, even faint light can change what the world looks like. That means a moonlit night is not the same as a moonless one. The difference can be subtle, but it is real. Landscapes become visible again. Shadows appear across fields and roads. Trees and buildings regain shape. What would otherwise be a deep, nearly invisible darkness becomes a softer grey world. For most of human history, this difference mattered much more than it does today. Before electricity, the moon was the brightest light people regularly saw at night. A full moon could extend evening activity by hours. People could travel farther. They could gather outside. They could see paths, rivers, and hills that would vanish completely during darker phases of the month. Then, about 2 weeks later, the cycle would reverse. As the moon faded toward the new moon phase, nights would grow darker again. The sky would still hold stars, but the landscape itself would fade into shadow. Evening life often slowed down earlier because there was simply less light to work with. This repeating pattern takes about 29.5 days. Astronomers call it the synodic month, the time it takes the moon to move through its familiar sequence of phases. The moon itself does not create light. Instead, it reflects sunlight back toward Earth. As the moon moves through its orbit, different portions of that sunlit surface face us, creating the crescent, half moon, and full moon that people have watched for thousands of years. Because the cycle is so steady, humans have used it as a natural clock. Many early calendars were based on lunar phases. Entire cultures track time by watching how the moon slowly changed shape across the month. But the moon does more than mark time in the sky. Across the natural world, many animals respond to those changes in nighttime brightness. Predators often hunt more easily when the landscape is illuminated. Prey animals sometimes hide more carefully on bright nights. Some insects change their movement patterns when moonlight becomes stronger. In the oceans, entire coral reefs can synchronize reproduction with specific lunar phases. These patterns remind scientists that lunar cycles are real environmental signals. They may not control behavior strongly in humans today, but they still shape ecosystems all across the planet. So when we ask whether the moon affects sleep, the answer is not dramatic. The moon does not cast a spell over the human body, but it does something quieter. It changes the brightness of the night sky in a repeating rhythm. And sleep, like many biological processes, listens carefully to changes in light and darkness. Tonight, we will slowly explore that relationship. We will look at how moonlight changes the way the night feels, how the human body responds to darkness, and why some scientists believe the moon may still nudge sleep patterns in small ways. To understand that connection, it helps to imagine a world where moonlight mattered much more than it does today. A world without streetlights, glowing windows, or phone screens. A world where the moon itself was one of the only lights in the night sky. And that is where our quiet journey begins. For most of human history, night did not look the way it does today. If you walk outside in a modern city after sunset, the darkness is usually filled with light. Street lights glow above sidewalks, windows shine from buildings, cars pass with bright headlights. Even the sky itself often has a faint orange glow from distant towns and highways. But for nearly all of human history, night was very different. Once the sun went down, most of the world became genuinely dark. Fires and small oil lamps offered a little light, but they illuminated only a small area. Outside that small circle of flame, the night returned quickly. In that darker world, the moon was not just something beautiful to look at. It was often the brightest light people could see after sunset. On a clear night during the full moon, the landscape could become surprisingly visible. Hills, trees, paths, and rivers would slowly reappear in pale shades of grey. Human eyes are very good at adjusting to low light. After a few minutes in darkness, the eyes become more sensitive, allowing shapes and movement to appear even under faint illumination. This means that moonlit nights could feel very different from moonless nights. When the moon was full and high in the sky, people could often walk long distances outdoors without carrying a lamp. Travelers in ancient times sometimes planned journeys to take advantage of bright lunar nights. Farmers, hunters, and fishermen could continue working later into the evening when the moon provided enough light to see. But about 2 weeks later, during the new moon, the night sky changed again. Without moonlight, the landscape would fade almost completely into darkness. The stars still shone above, but they did not illuminate the ground very much. In those conditions, the night felt deeper and more closed in. Activities often ended earlier simply because there was less light to see by. So across every month, the amount of usable nightlight naturally rose and fell. This slow change was not sudden. The moon's brightness increases gradually as it moves from a thin crescent toward a full disk. Each night, it reflects a little more sunlight toward Earth. After the full moon passes, the process reverses. The moon shrinks again into thinner shapes until it disappears into the darkness of the new moon. This repeating pattern means that nighttime brightness once followed a natural monthly rhythm, and humans were living directly inside that rhythm. In the modern world, we rarely think about this because artificial lighting overwhelms the night. A simple street light can produce dozens or even hundreds of lux of brightness, far stronger than the gentle glow of moonlight. Inside homes, electric lights can be hundreds of times brighter still. But before electricity, moonlight could make a meaningful difference in how the evening unfolded. A bright moon might encourage people to remain outside a little longer. Conversations could continue in open courtyards. Work could stretch further into the night. Travel between villages might feel safer when the ground was visible beneath a pale lunar glow. On darker nights, the opposite could happen. With little light to see by, people often moved indoors earlier. The world felt quieter and less active. These small behavioral changes matter when scientists think about sleep. Sleep is not only controlled by biology inside the body, it is also shaped by behavior. The time people go indoors, the time they stop moving, and the time they settle into rest all influence when sleep begins. If moonlight extended evening activity even slightly, it could gently shift sleep timing across the month. That possibility has interested researchers who study natural sleep patterns. Some scientists believe that before artificial lighting became common, human communities may have experienced small but consistent shifts in sleep timing, depending on how bright the night was. It would not have been a dramatic change, perhaps only minutes or small adjustments in evening routines. But when a rhythm repeats month after month for thousands of years, even small environmental signals can become familiar parts of life. And light, even faint light, has always been one of the most powerful signals the body receives. To understand why light matters so much for sleep, we need to look inside the body itself. Hidden deep within the brain is a system that constantly watches the cycle of day and night, adjusting hormones and alertness as the world grows brighter or darker. Next, we will explore that internal system and see how the human body decides when it is truly time for night to begin. Inside the human body, there is a quiet system that keeps track of time. It does not tick like a clock on a wall, and it does not need numbers to measure the hours. Instead, it listens to changes in light and darkness. From those signals, it builds a rhythm that helps guide when the body feels alert and when it begins to settle towards sleep. This rhythm is called the circadian rhythm. The word comes from Latin and means about a day. It is the body's internal cycle that repeats roughly every 24 hours. Even if a person were placed in a completely dark environment with no clocks and no sunlight, the body would still tend to follow this pattern of waking and resting. The circadian rhythm influences many parts of daily life. It affects body temperature, alertness, digestion, hormone levels, and the timing of sleep. During the day, the body gradually builds pressure for sleep, a process sometimes described as sleep drive. As evening approaches and the environment becomes darker, another system begins to prepare the body for rest. One of the key signals involved in this process is a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin is produced by a small structure in the brain known as the pineal gland. During the day, melatonin levels stay low. Light entering the eyes sends signals to the brain that keep this hormone suppressed. As darkness increases, that signal weakens. The pineal gland then begins releasing melatonin into the bloodstream. Melatonin does not force the body to fall asleep immediately. Instead, it acts more like a gentle message that night has arrived. It encourages the body to lower alertness, cool slightly, and move toward the state where sleep can begin. This system depends heavily on light. Special cells in the retina of the eye detect brightness in the environment. These cells are not used for seeing shapes or colors. Instead, they measure overall light levels. When light reaches the eyes, these cells send information to a region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This tiny structure acts as the main coordinator of the circadian rhythm. From there, signals travel through the nervous system to many parts of the body. Hormone release changes. Body temperature adjusts. Alertness rises or falls. Because of this system, even modest changes in light can influence how the body understands the timing of night. During the daytime, the effect is easy to see. Bright sunlight helps keep people alert and awake. In the evening, lowering light levels signals that it is time to slow down. This is why exposure to strong artificial light late at night can delay sleep. Screens, indoor lighting, and electronic devices can trick the brain into thinking that the day is still continuing. But the opposite is also true. When the environment grows darker, the body becomes more willing to release melatonin and allow sleep to approach. This is where moonlight enters the story. Moonlight is very faint compared with sunlight, but it still adds light to the night environment. On a clear night during a full moon, the landscape becomes visibly brighter than during the new moon phase. The eyes detect that difference, even if it feels subtle. Human vision changes dramatically after sunset. As darkness deepens, the eye relies more on rod cells, which are very sensitive to low light. Colors fade, but sensitivity increases. The world appears in shades of gray, and even faint illumination can reveal shapes that would otherwise remain hidden. Under moonlight, outlines of trees, buildings, and hills often become visible again. Shadows appear across the ground, though they are softer than daytime shadows. The night feels slightly more open because the environment can still be seen. For the circadian system, this small increase in brightness may be enough to slightly adjust how the brain perceives the timing of night. It does not replace darkness entirely, and it does not produce the strong alerting effect of artificial lights, but it gently alters the environment the body is reading. Scientists studying sleep often focus on these kinds of environmental signals. Sleep is not controlled by a single switch. Instead, it emerges from many influences working together. Light, activity, temperature, and habit all contribute to the moment when the body finally settles into rest. The moon does not directly command sleep. It does something simpler. It adds a small, repeating change to the brightness of the night sky. Across the month, the night alternates between darker evenings and brighter ones. For much of human history, this subtle cycle unfolded without interruption. People lived beneath a sky where the amount of nighttime light quietly rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Understanding how bright that moonlight actually is helps explain why the change can be noticed at all. Even though it appears soft and gentle, the moon can still transform the darkness of night in surprising ways. Moonlight often feels gentle and soft. It does not sting the eyes the way sunlight does. It casts pale shadows rather than sharp ones. Many people describe it as a quiet glow rather than a true source of light. But even though moonlight seems faint, it is still strong enough to change the appearance of the world at night. The moon itself does not produce light. Instead, it reflects sunlight. The surface of the moon is covered in dusty rock and fine powder left behind by billions of years of impacts. When sunlight reaches this surface, some of that light scatters outward into space. A small portion of that reflected sunlight travels toward Earth. When it reaches our planet, the light spreads across the night landscape. Because the moon is so large and relatively close compared with other objects in space, the amount of reflected light can still be noticeable. Scientists measure brightness using a unit called lux. Lux describes how much light falls on a surface. During a sunny afternoon, sunlight on Earth can reach around 100,000 lux. Even a cloudy day may still deliver several thousand lux. Moonlight is far weaker than this. On a clear night during a full moon, the brightness of moonlight usually reaches about 0.1 to 0.3 lux. That means moonlight is hundreds of thousands of times dimmer than direct sunlight. Compared with artificial lighting, it is also extremely faint. A typical street light can easily produce 10 to 50 lux, and indoor lighting may reach even higher levels. Despite this enormous difference, moonlight still matters in darkness. When the sun sets and artificial lights are absent, the night environment becomes extremely dim. In these conditions, the human eye adapts. The pupils widen, allowing more light to enter. The retina begins relying more heavily on rod cells, which are very sensitive to faint light. As the eye adjusts, even small amounts of light become meaningful. Under a full moon, the ground can appear bright enough to walk across fields or along paths. Hills and trees form visible silhouettes. Water reflects the light, creating soft shimmering patterns. The environment remains quiet and subdued, but it is no longer completely hidden. Moonlight also produces shadows. They are gentle and blurred compared with the shadows created by sunlight, but they still exist. If a person stands under a full moon, their body can cast a faint shadow across the ground. The direction of these shadows slowly shifts during the night as the moon moves across the sky. The brightness of moonlight also changes throughout the lunar cycle. When the moon appears as a thin crescent, only a small portion of its surface reflects sunlight toward Earth. The resulting light is very faint. On some nights, it may barely illuminate the landscape at all. As the moon grows toward its full phase, the illuminated portion increases. Each night, the sky becomes a little brighter. By the time the full moon arrives, the entire visible face of the moon reflects sunlight toward Earth. This is when moonlight reaches its peak brightness. The change can feel dramatic when compared with the darker nights earlier in the month. After the full moon passes, the process slowly reverses. The illuminated portion shrinks again. Nighttime brightness fades little by little until the moon disappears into the new moon phase. This steady rise and fall means that moonlight does not change suddenly. Instead, it creates a gradual rhythm across the month. The effect can also vary depending on the moon's position in the sky. When the moon is high overhead, its light travels through less of Earth's atmosphere and appears brighter. When it is near the horizon, the light passes through more air and can appear slightly dimmer. Cloud cover can also soften moonlight. Thin clouds may scatter the light across the sky, producing a diffuse glow. Thick clouds can block it almost entirely, returning the night to deeper darkness. Location matters as well. In rural areas far from cities, moonlight can be one of the strongest sources of nighttime illumination. In these environments, the difference between a full moon and a moonless night can feel striking. In cities filled with artificial lighting, the effect becomes harder to notice because electric lights overwhelm the natural glow of the sky. For most of human history, however, artificial lighting was limited. The moon was often the brightest object in the night sky, and its changing brightness formed a repeating pattern people experienced every month. This gentle shift in nighttime light is one reason scientists began wondering whether the moon might influence sleep patterns at all. Even though moonlight is faint, it still reaches the eyes. The circadian system is designed to notice changes in light, especially when the environment is otherwise dark. And because the lunar cycle repeats every 29.5 days, that change in brightness follows a steady rhythm, a rhythm that quietly returns month after month beneath the night sky. The moon does not shine the same way every night. If someone watches the sky over many evenings, they will notice that the shape of the moon slowly changes. Some nights it appears as a thin curved sliver. Other nights it grows wider and brighter. Eventually it becomes a full circle of light before gradually shrinking again. This repeating pattern is known as the lunar cycle. The full cycle takes about 29.5 days to complete. During that time, the moon moves through several phases as it travels around Earth. These phases are not caused by the moon changing shape. Instead, they happen because different portions of the moon's sunlit surface become visible from Earth. Half of the moon is always illuminated by sunlight, but from our perspective on Earth, we only see the part of that illuminated half that faces us. At the beginning of the cycle comes the new moon. During the new moon phase, the moon sits roughly between Earth and the sun. The sunlit side of the moon faces away from us, leaving the side facing Earth in darkness. Because of this alignment, the moon becomes almost invisible in the night sky. These nights are often the darkest of the month. Without moonlight, the stars appear more clearly. The Milky Way can stretch across the sky like a faint band of mist. Landscapes fade into shadow, and the ground beneath our feet becomes difficult to see without artificial light. A few nights later, the moon begins to appear again as a thin crescent. This crescent moon hangs low in the evening sky shortly after sunset. Only a small portion of its surface reflects sunlight toward Earth, producing a soft, delicate glow. As the days pass, the crescent slowly grows thicker. This stage is known as the waxing phase. The word waxing simply means that the illuminated portion of the moon is increasing. Each night, the moon appears slightly larger and brighter than the night before. It also rises later in the afternoon and remains visible longer into the evening. About a week after the new moon, the moon reaches the first quarter phase. At this point, half of the moon's visible surface is illuminated. The name quarter refers to the moon being roughly 1/4 of the way through its orbit around Earth. The half-lit moon often appears striking in the sky, with a sharp line separating the bright and dark regions. After the first quarter, the moon continues growing. This period is called the waxing gibbous phase. The moon now appears more than half illuminated, though it has not yet reached a full circle. Each night it rises earlier and stays visible deeper into the night. Eventually the moon reaches the full moon. During this phase, Earth sits roughly between the sun and the moon. the entire face of the moon that points toward Earth is illuminated by sunlight. The result is the brightest moonlight of the entire cycle. A full moon rises near sunset and remains visible throughout the night until sunrise. When it climbs high into the sky, its light can brighten fields, forests, and open landscapes with a pale silver glow. After the full moon, the cycle begins to reverse. The illuminated portion of the moon starts to shrink. This stage is called the waning phase. The word waning means that the visible sunlight is decreasing. The moon moves through the waning gibbous phase as its bright surface slowly narrows. A week after the full moon, it reaches the last quarter, where half of the visible surface is illuminated once again. From there, the moon continues fading into a thinner crescent. These waning crescent moons rise late at night and remain visible into the early morning hours before sunrise. Eventually, the moon returns to the new moon phase, completing the cycle. Because of this pattern, the brightness of moonlight follows a steady rhythm across the month. Dark nights cluster around the new moon. Brighter nights appear as the moon approaches fullness. Then the light fades again as the cycle repeats. For most of human history, this slow change unfolded quietly above every community on Earth. People lived beneath a sky where the brightness of night followed a predictable rhythm. Even without watching the moon closely, they experienced its presence through the way the night landscape changed. Some nights, the world felt dim and hidden. Other nights, it glowed softly under the light of the moon. From time to time, scientists have wondered whether the moon might quietly influence human sleep. It is an old question. For centuries, people have linked the moon to many aspects of human behavior. Stories about lunar madness appear in folklore across cultures, and the very word lunatic comes from the Latin word for moon. Many of these beliefs were based on observation and storytelling, rather than careful measurement. Modern science approaches the question differently. Instead of relying on anecdotes, researchers attempt to measure sleep directly using controlled experiments and detailed data. Over the past few decades, a small number of scientific studies have explored whether sleep patterns change across the lunar cycle. One of the most widely discussed experiments took place in a sleep laboratory in Switzerland. In this study, researchers monitored volunteers who were sleeping in a carefully controlled environment. The participants stayed in rooms where outside light was blocked, and the conditions were kept consistent from night to night. Importantly, the volunteers did not know what phase the moon was in during the experiment. The scientists recorded brain activity, sleep timing, and sleep depth using equipment commonly used in sleep research. Electrodes measured brain waves, eye movements, and muscle activity while participants slept. These measurements allowed researchers to see exactly when people entered different stages of sleep. When the data was analyzed, an interesting pattern appeared. Near the time of the full moon, participants seemed to take slightly longer to fall asleep. On average, the delay was only a few minutes, but it appeared consistently across the group. The researchers also noticed a small decrease in deep sleep, the stage of sleep that helps the body recover and restore energy. In addition, total sleep duration appeared to drop slightly during nights close to the full moon. Again, the change was modest. Participants slept roughly 20 minutes less compared with other phases of the lunar cycle. Their bodies also showed slightly lower levels of melatonin, the hormone that helps signal nighttime to the brain. Because the experiment took place in a controlled laboratory where participants could not see the moon, the researchers found the results intriguing. If the participants did not know the lunar phase, then the pattern could not easily be explained by expectation or suggestion. Some scientists suggested that the human body might still retain a faint sensitivity to the lunar cycle. Perhaps the circadian system, which already responds strongly to light and darkness, might also respond in subtle ways to the slow rhythm of moonlight across the month. However, the story did not end there. After the results were published, other researchers attempted to repeat similar experiments or analyze larger sleep datasets. In many of these later studies, the lunar pattern did not appear clearly at all. Some experiments found no meaningful difference in sleep timing between full moon nights and other nights. Participants fell asleep at the same time and slept for similar durations regardless of the lunar phase. Measurements of sleep stages also showed little variation. Large observational studies using sleep trackers and long-term sleep records have often reached similar conclusions. When thousands of nights of sleep are examined, any lunar signal becomes difficult to detect. Because of these mixed results, scientists continue to debate whether the moon truly affects human sleep in a measurable way. One possibility is that the lunar effect exists, but is very small. If the moon influences sleep by only a few minutes per night, the signal could easily disappear within the natural variation of human sleep. People's sleep patterns already change from day to day because of stress, schedules, health, and countless other factors. Another possibility is that moonlight affected sleep more strongly in the past, before artificial lighting became common. In modern environments filled with electric light, the natural brightness of the moon may simply be too faint to compete. Researchers also consider environmental explanations. In places where people sleep outdoors or where indoor lighting is minimal, moonlight may still extend evening activity slightly. This could delay bedtime without people consciously noticing. In laboratory environments where outside light is removed, these environmental cues disappear, making it harder to observe any natural pattern. Because of these challenges, studying the moon's influence on sleep has proven surprisingly complex. Even with modern equipment and careful experimental design, detecting small environmental signals within human sleep patterns can be difficult. And this difficulty leads to an important question. If the moon does influence sleep at all, why are the results so inconsistent and difficult to measure? Trying to measure whether the moon affects human sleep sounds simple at first. The moon follows a predictable cycle. Sleep can be measured with modern tools. In theory, scientists should be able to compare sleep during different lunar phases and see whether a pattern appears. But in practice, studying the moon's influence on sleep is surprisingly difficult. One of the biggest challenges comes from modern lighting. For most of human history, the sun, the moon, and small fires were the main sources of light at night. Darkness arrived gradually after sunset. The brightness of the moon could noticeably change the environment because there were few other light sources competing with it. Today, the situation is very different. Cities glow long after the sun has disappeared. Streetlights illuminate roads and sidewalks. Buildings shine with electric lights through their windows. Cars pass by with bright headlights. Even rural areas often contain enough artificial lighting to soften the darkness of the night. In these environments, moonlight becomes much harder to notice. A full moon might provide around a quarter of a lux of brightness under clear skies, but a single outdoor lamp can easily produce dozens of lux. Indoor lighting can be hundreds of times brighter still. Against this background, the moon's light becomes almost invisible to the circadian system. This means that many people simply do not experience the natural lunar light cycle anymore. Another complication is that most people sleep indoors. Houses, apartments, and hotels are designed to block outside light. Curtains, blinds, and walls reduce the amount of moonlight that can reach a bedroom. Even when windows are uncovered, the brightness that enters a room is often greatly reduced compared with the outdoor environment. In many homes, the bedroom may remain nearly the same brightness every night, regardless of the moon's phase. Because of this, researchers studying sleep often have trouble determining whether participants are actually exposed to moonlight at all. If the moon's light never reaches the eyes, then it cannot influence the body's light-sensitive systems. Sleep behavior also varies widely between individuals. Some people fall asleep quickly and wake up at the same time every morning. Others have irregular schedules that change throughout the week. Stress, diet, exercise, work schedules, and screen use all influence how easily a person falls asleep and how deeply they rest. Even small changes in daily routine can alter sleep timing by much more than the few minutes scientists are trying to detect in lunar studies. For example, staying up slightly later to watch television, using a smartphone before bed, or drinking caffeine late in the day can easily shift sleep patterns. These influences are strong and immediate. Compared with them, the moon's subtle changes in nighttime brightness may be extremely small. This makes it difficult to isolate a lunar signal within the larger background of everyday life. Large data sets are often required to reveal small effects. If a lunar cycle changes sleep timing by only a few minutes, researchers may need to examine thousands or even millions of sleep records before a consistent pattern becomes visible. Smaller studies may simply not contain enough data to detect such subtle trends. Even when large datasets are available, other variables still complicate the analysis. Weather can hide the moon behind clouds. Seasonal changes alter the length of the night. People move between different environments with different lighting conditions. Each of these factors adds noise to the data. There is also the question of awareness. If participants know they are being studied during full moon periods, their expectations might influence how they report their sleep. Scientists often try to prevent this by keeping participants unaware of the lunar phase during experiments, but this is not always possible in observational studies. Taken together, these challenges mean that detecting the moon's influence on human sleep is like trying to hear a whisper in a crowded room. The signal may exist, but it is easily masked by stronger influences. Interestingly, when scientists turn their attention away from humans and look at the natural world, the picture becomes clearer. Across many ecosystems, animals respond strongly to the changing brightness of the moon. For them, moonlight can alter the balance between safety and danger, changing how they hunt, hide, and move through the night. While the moon's influence on human sleep remains difficult to measure, its effect on the natural world is much easier to observe. Across many ecosystems, animals respond clearly to changes in moonlight. The brightness of the night can alter how creatures move, hunt, hide, and communicate. For animals that are active after sunset, even small changes in light can shift the balance between safety and danger. For many predators, moonlit nights offer an advantage. Under brighter conditions, animals that rely on sight can detect movement more easily. A fox moving through a field, an owl gliding between trees, or a wild cat stalking through tall grass may find it easier to spot prey when the ground is softly illuminated by moonlight. The increased visibility can improve hunting success. Some studies have shown that predators capture more prey during bright lunar phases. The extra light allows them to track motion more precisely and navigate the landscape without stumbling or slowing down. For hunters that depend on stealth and vision, moonlit nights can become valuable opportunities. But for prey animals, the same light can bring greater risk. Small mammals such as mice, rabbits, and many rodents often avoid open spaces when the moon is bright. In darkness, they can move more safely, using shadows to hide their movement. Under moonlight, however, their silhouettes become easier for predators to detect. Because of this danger, many prey species reduce their activity during full moon nights. Instead of foraging in open areas, they may remain under bushes, inside burrows, or within thick vegetation. Their movements become shorter and more cautious. In some environments, the number of animals visible in the open landscape can drop significantly during bright lunar phases. This behavior creates what scientists sometimes call a lunar landscape of fear. The moon does not directly harm prey animals, but the extra light changes how exposed they feel. As the night grows brighter, predators gain an advantage, and prey species respond by becoming more cautious. Insects also show interesting responses to moonlight. Many nocturnal insects navigate using natural light sources in the sky. The moon, along with distant stars, provides orientation cues that help them maintain direction during flight. Some insects adjust their flight height or movement patterns, depending on how bright the sky appears. For example, certain moths become less active during full moon nights. Their pale wings can reflect moonlight, making them easier targets for birds and bats. By reducing activity when the sky is bright, they may lower the chances of being seen. Other insects adjust in the opposite direction. Some species increase activity under moonlight because it allows them to locate mates or resources more easily. In environments where visual signals are important, the gentle brightness of a full moon can make communication possible. Many animals possess extremely sensitive vision that allows them to detect faint light levels far below what humans can perceive. The eyes of nocturnal creatures often contain large pupils and specialized retinas that capture tiny amounts of light. Some species also have reflective layers behind the retina that bounce light back through the photoreceptors, improving sensitivity even further. Because of these adaptations, animals can detect very small differences in brightness across the lunar cycle. A night illuminated by a waxing gibbous moon may feel dramatically brighter to them than a night during the new moon phase. These subtle changes become meaningful signals that influence when animals leave shelter, when they search for food, and when they choose to remain hidden. The moon, in this way, becomes part of the natural schedule of life. Month after month, the sky slowly brightens and dims. Animals respond by adjusting their behavior to match the shifting environment. Predators take advantage of brighter nights. Prey animals become cautious. Insects change their patterns of flight and activity. Across ecosystems, this lunar rhythm quietly shapes the behavior of countless species. And in some cases, the influence of the moon becomes even more dramatic. Certain events in nature occur with remarkable precision, synchronized not just to the time of year, but to specific phases of the lunar cycle. Far below the surface of tropical oceans, the moon quietly helps coordinate one of the most remarkable events in the natural world. Coral reefs are made up of tiny animals called coral polyps. Each polyp is small and soft-bodied, yet together they build vast underwater structures that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Over time, these colonies create the reefs that support some of the richest ecosystems on Earth. For much of the year, coral reefs appear calm and unchanged. But during certain nights of the year, something extraordinary happens. Large numbers of coral colonies release eggs and sperm into the ocean at nearly the same time. This event is known as coral spawning. Instead of reproducing individually at random moments, many coral species coordinate their reproduction with incredible precision. The water fills with tiny bundles of reproductive cells that rise slowly toward the surface like drifting snow. Within hours, enormous areas of reef can release billions of these small floating spheres. The timing of this event is not accidental. In many reef systems around the world, coral spawning occurs shortly after a full moon. Often, the event takes place a few nights after the brightest lunar phase of the year's spawning season. The exact timing varies by species and location, but the pattern is remarkably consistent. Scientists have long wondered how coral colonies coordinate this synchronization. Unlike animals with complex brains, coral polyps do not communicate with each other in obvious ways. Yet entire reefs can release reproductive cells on the same nights, sometimes within minutes of one another. Researchers believe that lunar cycles play an important role in this timing. The moon provides a steady and reliable environmental signal that repeats every month. Changes in moonlight brightness, along with the gravitational cycle that affects tides, create patterns that coral may use as a kind of natural calendar. Over many generations, coral species appear to have evolved sensitivity to these patterns. The brightness of the full moon may help signal when the spawning season is approaching. As the lunar cycle progresses and certain nights arrive, internal biological clocks within the coral colonies trigger the release of eggs and sperm. Temperature, water chemistry, and seasonal changes also contribute to this timing. But the moon often acts as the final cue that aligns the moment of release. The benefit of this synchronization is significant. By releasing reproductive cells at the same time, coral colonies greatly increase the chances that eggs and sperm will meet in the open water. The ocean is vast, and individual reproductive cells are extremely small. If spawning occurred randomly, many of these cells would never encounter one another. Mass spawning events solve this problem by flooding the water with enormous numbers of reproductive cells all at once. Predators may consume some of the floating bundles, but the sheer volume ensures that many survive long enough to fertilize. The fertilized larvae then drift through ocean currents, before eventually settling onto surfaces where new coral colonies can grow. These events can be so large that divers sometimes describe them as underwater snowstorms. the water becomes filled with small pink, orange, or white spheres, rising slowly through the reef. Fish and other marine animals gather to feed on the drifting bundles, turning the spawning event into a brief but intense burst of activity across the ecosystem. Because coral reefs are so important for marine life, these synchronized spawning events help support entire food webs. The moon's repeating cycle provides a reliable signal that coral can depend on year after year. Even though the moon is nearly 400,000 kilometers away, its steady rhythm helps coordinate reproduction in organisms that live deep beneath the ocean surface. This is one of the clearest examples of how lunar cycles influence life on Earth. It shows that the moon's presence is not just something visible in the sky. Its patterns can become deeply woven into biological systems across the planet. And while coral respond primarily to light and seasonal signals, the moon also influences Earth in another powerful way. Its gravity gently pulls on the oceans themselves, creating tides that shape coastal environments around the world. The moon influences Earth in a way that is both powerful and easy to overlook. Its gravity quietly pulls on our planet every moment of every day. This pull is not strong enough to move mountains or shift continents, but it does have a clear and visible effect on Earth's oceans. The result is the rise and fall of tides. Tides are the slow movement of ocean water, caused mainly by the gravitational attraction of the moon. As the moon orbits Earth, its gravity pulls on the water closest to it. This pull causes the ocean to bulge slightly toward the moon. At the same time, a second bulge forms on the opposite side of the planet. This second bulge happens because Earth itself is being pulled slightly toward the moon, leaving water on the far side momentarily behind. The result is that two large bulges of ocean water form on opposite sides of the planet. As Earth rotates beneath these bulges, coastlines move through them. When a coastline passes through one of the bulges, the ocean level rises. This is known as high tide. When the coastline moves away from the bulge, the water level drops again, creating low tide. Because Earth rotates once every 24 hours, while the moon continues moving in its orbit, most coastal areas experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. These tides are not always the same height. Sometimes the difference between high and low tide becomes larger. At other times, the change is smaller. The moon's position relative to the sun plays an important role in this variation. During full moons and new moons, the sun, earth, and moon align more closely in a straight line. When this happens, the gravitational pull of the sun adds to the moon's pull on Earth's oceans. This combined force produces what are called spring tides. Spring tides create higher high tides and lower low tides than usual. The word spring in this case does not refer to the season. Instead, it means that the tides spring forward or increase in range. About a week later, when the moon reaches the first or last quarter phase, the sun and moon pull on Earth from different directions. Their gravitational forces partially counteract one another. During these periods, the difference between high and low tide becomes smaller. These are called neap tides. Neap tides produce gentler shifts in ocean levels, with lower high tides and higher low tides compared with spring tides. For coastal ecosystems, these tidal rhythms are extremely important. Many marine organisms have adapted their lives to the predictable rise and fall of the ocean. Shellfish, crabs, sea stars, and many other species live in the intertidal zone, the region of shoreline that is sometimes underwater and sometimes exposed to air. These animals must survive both conditions. When the tide rises, the water brings food, oxygen, and protection from drying out. When the tide falls, these creatures may be exposed to sunlight, wind, and predators. Many species have developed strategies that allow them to cling tightly to rocks or retreat into small pools of water until the tide returns. Some animals time their feeding and movement to match the tidal cycle. Fish may swim into shallow coastal areas during high tide to search for food among submerged plants and rocks. As the tide retreats, they return to deeper water. Shorebirds often arrive during low tide when the falling water exposes shellfish and small animals buried in the sand. In this way, the moon's gravitational pull shapes daily rhythms across coastal ecosystems. Entire communities of organisms live according to these repeating patterns. The tides determine when certain areas are accessible, when food becomes available, and when animals can move safely between habitats. For humans, tides have also influenced daily life throughout history. Many of the world's earliest settlements formed near coastlines. People relied on the ocean for food, transportation, and trade. Understanding tidal patterns helped fishermen know when to launch boats and when to return safely to shore. Harbors, docks, and coastal navigation have long depended on predicting the rise and fall of the sea. The moon's gravity, though distant, has quietly guided these rhythms for as long as oceans have existed on Earth. Yet despite its strong effect on vast bodies of water, this gravitational pull does not have the same impact on individual human bodies. The forces involved operate across enormous scales, and the human body is simply too small for these tidal effects to produce meaningful changes. Because the moon can move entire oceans, it is natural to wonder whether its gravity might also influence the human body. After all, the human body contains a large amount of water. An adult is made up of roughly 60% water by weight. This simple fact has led to many popular ideas suggesting that lunar gravity might pull on the water inside our bodies in the same way it pulls on the oceans. At first glance, the comparison seems reasonable. But when scientists examine the physics more closely, the situation becomes very different. The forces involved in ocean tides operate on enormous scales, and those same forces become extremely small when applied to something as small as a human body. To understand why, it helps to think about how tides actually form. Tides are not simply caused by the moon pulling on water. Instead, they occur because gravity acts slightly differently across the diameter of Earth. The side of the planet closest to the moon experiences a slightly stronger gravitational pull than the side that is farther away. This small difference in gravitational force stretches the oceans very slightly. The result is the formation of the two large tidal bulges that circle the planet as Earth rotates. But even these bulges are not as dramatic as they might sound. The ocean surface does not rise into giant waves reaching toward the moon. Instead, the change is subtle and spread across thousands of kilometers. Because oceans are vast and fluid, even tiny gravitational differences can move enormous volumes of water. The key factor here is scale. Earth's oceans cover more than 70% of the planet's surface and contain about 1.3 billion cubic kilometers of water. When gravity acts across such a huge body, the effect becomes visible as tides along coastlines. A human body, by comparison, is extremely small. The gravitational difference between the top of a person's body and the bottom is almost non-existent. The moon pulls on the entire body nearly equally, leaving no meaningful stretching force to move water within tissues. In physics, this difference is often called tidal force. Tidal forces depend not just on the strength of gravity, but on how much the gravitational pull changes across an object's size. Large objects, such as oceans or even entire planets, experience measurable tidal forces. Small objects, like a person, experience almost none. In fact, the moon's gravitational pull on a human body is extraordinarily weak. If a person weighs around 70 kilograms, the moon's gravitational attraction on that person is only a tiny fraction of a newton. For comparison, everyday objects around us exert similar or even stronger gravitational forces. A nearby building, a mountain, or even a large truck parked down the street can exert a gravitational pull comparable to or greater than the moon's influence on an individual person. Despite this, those nearby objects do not produce measurable changes in human behavior or physiology. The idea that lunar gravity might control emotions, sleep, or mental health, therefore, does not match what physics predicts. Scientific studies looking for behavioral changes linked to lunar gravity have consistently found no reliable evidence. Researchers have examined hospital admissions, crime statistics, emergency room visits, and many other datasets across different lunar phases. While occasional studies have reported small patterns, larger analyses generally find that the apparent effects disappear when more data is included. This suggests that lunar gravity itself is not responsible for changes in human behavior. The moon's influence on Earth is real, but it acts most strongly on large systems such as oceans and coastlines. These environments contain enough water and span enough distance for tidal forces to create visible movement. Human bodies are simply too small for the same effect to occur. When scientists search for possible ways the moon might influence sleep, they therefore focus on another pathway. Instead of gravity, they turn their attention back to light. Moonlight is faint, but it still reaches the eyes. The circadian system is sensitive to changes in brightness, especially when the environment is otherwise dark. If the moon influences sleep at all, the most realistic explanation is not gravitational pulling, but the quiet presence of light in the night sky. The night sky has changed dramatically in the past 2 centuries. For most of human history, darkness arrived gradually after sunset. Once the sun disappeared, the world dimmed quickly. Small fires, candles, and oil lamps provided limited pools of light. But beyond those small circles, the landscape remained mostly dark. In that environment, moonlight could stand out clearly. A full moon rising into the sky could brighten fields, paths, and rivers enough to make them visible again. The gentle glow did not turn night into day, but it softened the darkness. People walking outdoors could often see where they were going, and objects that were hidden during moonless nights slowly reappeared. Today, the situation is very different. artificial lighting has transformed the nighttime environment. Cities and towns remain illuminated long after sunset. Electric light fills streets, homes, and public spaces, creating levels of brightness that far exceed what the moon can produce. To understand the difference, it helps to compare light levels. Moonlight during a clear full moon typically measures around 0.1 to 0.3 lux. This is enough for the human eye to see shapes and movement once it adapts to darkness. Streetlights, however, are much brighter. Many streetlights produce between 10 and 100 lux at ground level. In other words, a single streetlight can easily be dozens or even hundreds of times brighter than moonlight. In urban areas where multiple lights overlap, the brightness can be even higher. Indoor lighting is stronger still. Inside homes, offices, and stores, electric lighting often reaches hundreds of lux. A brightly lit room may measure 300 lux or more. Compared with moonlight, these environments are thousands of times brighter. Because of this difference, artificial light has a much stronger effect on the human body's circadian system. The eyes contain specialized cells that detect brightness and send signals to the brain's internal clock. When these cells detect bright light, they suppress the release of melatonin. This hormone normally rises in darkness and helps signal that it is time for sleep. Exposure to artificial light in the evening can therefore delay the body's sense of night. Screens, lamps, and overhead lighting can keep the brain alert long after sunset. In modern societies, many people remain exposed to strong light well into the evening hours, sometimes right up until bedtime. Compared with this level of brightness, moonlight is extremely gentle. Even during the brightest full moon, its light rarely reaches levels that strongly suppress melatonin. The body's circadian system may still detect the faint increase in brightness, but the effect is far weaker than that produced by electric lighting. In many environments, moonlight is now almost invisible against the background of artificial illumination. This phenomenon is often called light pollution. Cities create glowing domes of scattered light that reflect off clouds and dust in the atmosphere. As a result, the sky itself becomes brighter, and the natural contrast between moonlit nights and moonless nights becomes harder to notice. In places with heavy light pollution, the lunar cycle may barely change the brightness of the environment at all. Yet this is not true everywhere. In rural areas far from large cities, the night sky can still grow very dark after sunset. Without artificial lighting nearby, the natural glow of the moon becomes much more noticeable. A full moon can illuminate open landscapes, while nights near the new moon return the environment to deeper darkness. In these places, the lunar cycle remains visible. Fields, forests, deserts, and coastlines can experience clear changes in brightness across the month. People who spend time outdoors in these environments often notice how dramatically the moon can transform the appearance of the night. Because of this, some scientists believe that lunar effects on sleep may still exist in low-light environments. If a person lives in a place where artificial lighting is minimal, the difference between bright lunar nights and dark lunar nights may still influence evening activity. People might remain outside slightly longer when the ground is visible under moonlight. That small shift in behavior could subtly change the timing of sleep. Understanding how sleep behaves in such natural environments offers an important clue about how humans may have rested for thousands of years before electric lighting reshaped the night. To understand how the moon might influence sleep, some researchers have looked beyond modern cities and laboratories. Instead of studying people surrounded by electric lighting, scientists have traveled to communities where artificial light is limited or completely absent. In these environments, people experience the natural cycle of daylight and darkness much more directly. When the sun sets, the environment grows dark quickly. Without streetlights or bright indoor lamps, evening activity naturally slows. Many daily routines begin to follow the rhythm of the sun. People often wake close to sunrise and settle down for rest not long after sunset. These patterns allow researchers to observe how sleep behaves when natural light once again becomes the main signal guiding the body's internal clock. Several studies have explored sleep patterns in rural or traditional communities that have little access to electricity. Participants in these studies often wear small devices that track movement and light exposure throughout the day and night. The results show that sleep in these environments often follows a very different rhythm than sleep in modern urban settings. People tend to spend more time outdoors during daylight hours, which exposes their eyes to strong natural sunlight. This bright daytime light strengthens the circadian rhythm, helping the body clearly distinguish between day and night. When evening arrives and the environment becomes dark, the body begins producing melatonin naturally. Because artificial light is minimal, the rise of melatonin is rarely delayed by screens or indoor lighting. As a result, sleep often begins earlier in the evening, compared with modern lifestyles. However, researchers have noticed another interesting pattern. In some communities living without electricity, sleep timing can shift slightly depending on the brightness of the moon. During nights when the moon is near its full phase, people sometimes remain active for longer after sunset. The added brightness allows them to continue outdoor tasks, conversations, or social activities that would be difficult in complete darkness. Even small increases in light can make the landscape easier to navigate. Paths become visible again. People can move through villages or open areas without carrying lamps. This additional visibility can extend evening activity by a modest amount of time. As a result, bedtime may occur slightly later during brighter lunar phases. The shift is not dramatic. In most cases, the difference may be only a few minutes or perhaps a short delay in the evening routine. But the pattern appears consistently enough that researchers believe moonlight may subtly influence sleep timing in these environments. During darker nights around the new moon, activity tends to end earlier. Without moonlight, the landscape quickly fades into darkness once the sun sets. With little light to see by, people often move indoors sooner and settle into rest earlier in the night. This pattern suggests that the lunar cycle may influence behavior rather than directly controlling sleep biology. Moonlight does not force the body to stay awake. Instead, it changes the environment in which evening activities take place. When the world is slightly brighter, people may simply stay active a little longer. Over many generations, this small shift in activity may have repeated month after month. In the modern world, artificial lighting often overwhelms this natural pattern. Electric lights allow people to remain active long after sunset regardless of the moon's phase. The difference between lunar nights becomes much harder to notice. but in places where darkness still dominates the night sky. The lunar cycle can remain visible. The gentle rise and fall of moonlight continues to shape how the evening feels and how long people remain active outdoors. Even if the changes in sleep timing are small, they reveal something important about the human relationship with natural light. For most of our species' history, humans lived in environments where the sun, the moon, and the stars were the main sources of illumination. Our sleep patterns evolved within that natural rhythm. And while the moon's effect on modern sleep may be subtle, its presence in Earth's environment extends far beyond the brightness of the night sky. When people think about the moon, they often imagine its light in the night sky or its influence on the ocean's tides. But the moon plays another role that is far larger and more important for life on Earth. It helps stabilize the planet itself. Earth spins like a giant top as it travels around the sun. This spinning motion creates the cycle of day and night. But the planet does not spin perfectly upright. Instead, its axis is tilted slightly. Earth's axis currently tilts about 23.5 degrees relative to its orbit around the sun. This tilt is the reason we experience seasons. During part of the year, the northern hemisphere leans slightly toward the sun, receiving more direct sunlight and longer days. This produces summer in the north and winter in the south. Half a year later, the situation reverses. The tilt of Earth's axis therefore controls how sunlight is distributed across the planet throughout the year. The remarkable thing is that this tilt has remained relatively stable for millions of years, and the moon is a major reason why. The moon's gravity interacts with Earth in a way that helps steady the planet's rotation. In simple terms, the moon acts like a stabilizing weight that keeps Earth's axis from wobbling too dramatically over time. Without the moon, Earth's tilt could shift much more wildly. Computer models of planetary motion suggest that a moonless Earth might experience large swings in axial tilt over long periods of time. The tilt could change from relatively small angles to much larger ones, possibly shifting between 0 degrees and more than 60 degrees. Such changes would produce extreme variations in climate. Imagine a planet where the axis suddenly tilts far more steeply than it does today. In that scenario, parts of the planet might receive far more sunlight during summer and far less during winter. Some regions could experience intense seasonal extremes, with scorching summers followed by deep, prolonged winters. Other periods might bring very mild seasons if the tilt temporarily decreased. These large shifts would make the climate much less predictable over long periods of time. The presence of the moon helps prevent these extreme swings. Because the moon is relatively large compared with Earth, its gravitational pull interacts strongly with Earth's rotation. This interaction slows down large changes in the planet's tilt, helping keep it within a narrower range. Over millions of years, this stability has helped create a climate system that remains relatively consistent. Stable seasons allow ecosystems to develop reliable patterns. Plants grow during predictable times of the year. Animals migrate, reproduce, and store food according to seasonal cycles. Entire food webs depend on the regular return of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Humans also evolved within this stable environment. Agriculture, for example, depends heavily on predictable seasons. Crops must be planted and harvested at the right time of year. Stable climate patterns made it possible for early civilizations to plan around the rhythms of nature. In this sense, the moon's stabilizing influence reaches far beyond the night sky. By helping maintain Earth's steady axial tilt, the moon has quietly supported the environmental conditions that allowed complex ecosystems and human societies to develop. It is remarkable to consider how much influence a distant object can have. The moon sits nearly 400,000 kilometers away from Earth, yet its presence helps guide the long-term stability of our planet's climate system. While we often notice the moon through its changing phases and gentle light, its deeper influence operates on scales far larger than a single night. For most people, however, the moon is not experienced through planetary physics. It is experienced through sight. Its bright disk rises into the sky. Its shape changes slowly across the month. Even without instruments or scientific knowledge, anyone can follow the lunar cycle simply by looking upward. This visibility is one reason the moon has become such a powerful presence in human culture and imagination. Among all the objects in the night sky, the moon is the easiest to notice. Stars appear as small points of light scattered across the darkness. Planets can sometimes shine brightly, but they still look like distant stars. The moon is different. It is large, bright, and close enough that its surface can be seen even with the naked eye. Mountains and craters cast shadows across its face. Its shape changes from night to night. Sometimes it appears as a thin, curved crescent. Other times, it grows into a bright circle that dominates the sky. Because of this visibility, humans have paid attention to the moon for thousands of years. Unlike many astronomical objects, the moon requires no telescope to observe. Anyone who spends time outdoors can notice its phases. A person might see a crescent moon hanging low in the evening sky one week, then watch it grow larger each night until it becomes full. This simple pattern makes the lunar cycle easy to track. Early societies around the world used the moon as a natural calendar. By counting the days between full moons or new moons, people could measure the passing of time. Many traditional calendars were built around lunar cycles, dividing the year into months based on the moon's phases. In fact, the word month itself comes from the moon. The lunar cycle lasts about 29.5 days, which closely matches the length of many historical calendar months. Ancient civilizations in regions such as Mesopotamia, China, and the Americas all developed systems that followed the repeating rhythm of the moon. Farmers sometimes used lunar calendars to help guide planting or harvesting schedules. Religious festivals and cultural traditions were also tied to specific lunar phases. Full moons, in particular, often became markers for gatherings, celebrations, or rituals. Because the moon's phases are so visible, they easily become associated with memorable events. If a bright full moon appears on the same night that something unusual happens, people may naturally link the two in memory. For example, someone might remember a restless night of sleep that happened under a full moon. Because the moon was clearly visible, it becomes an easy explanation for the experience. Human memory tends to work this way. Events that are visually striking or emotionally noticeable are easier to recall later. The moon, especially when it is full, stands out strongly against the night sky. Its presence can make a particular evening feel distinctive. Over time, these memorable nights can reinforce the idea that the moon influences human behavior. If someone sleeps poorly during a full moon, they may remember that experience clearly. If they sleep poorly during a new moon, however, there is no visible lunar event to attach the memory to. The restless night may simply be forgotten. This kind of selective memory can slowly strengthen beliefs about lunar influence. Across many cultures, stories developed around the idea that the moon affects human emotions, sleep, or mental state. Folklore often describes strange or heightened behavior during full moons. Tales of sleepless nights, vivid dreams, or unusual activity became part of traditional storytelling. These stories traveled through generations. Even today, many people feel that the full moon somehow makes the night feel different. The brightness of the sky, the clear shape of the moon, and the long tradition of lunar folklore can all combine to create a sense that something special is happening. The moon becomes more than just an astronomical object. It becomes a symbol woven into culture, memory, and imagination. Its regular cycle makes it familiar, yet its appearance can still feel mysterious. Because it rises into the sky without effort or explanation, it captures attention in a way few other natural phenomena do. This strong visual presence helps explain why the moon is so often connected to human sleep. If someone wakes during the night and sees the bright disk of a full moon outside the window, the experience can feel meaningful. The moon becomes part of the story of that night. But psychology also plays a role in how people interpret these experiences. The way the human mind forms expectations and memories can strongly influence how events are understood, especially when the moon is involved. Across many cultures, the full moon has long been connected with unusual behavior. Stories about sleepless nights, strange dreams, and heightened emotions often appear in folklore when the moon becomes bright and round in the sky. In European traditions, people once believed that the full moon could influence the human mind. The word lunacy comes from the Latin word luna, meaning moon. In older times, some believed that the moon could stir confusion, restlessness, or strange actions. Similar ideas appear in other parts of the world. Stories linking the moon to human behavior appear in myths, legends, and traditional beliefs across many cultures. In some places, the full moon is associated with transformation or heightened activity. In others, it is believed to influence mood, sleep, or dreams. These ideas are part of human storytelling. The moon is bright and easy to notice. When it appears full in the sky, it becomes the most visible object at night. Because of this, it is natural for people to connect memorable events with its presence. Psychology offers an explanation for how these beliefs can grow. One important factor is expectation. When people believe that the full moon might affect sleep or behavior, they may pay closer attention to how they feel on those nights. If they happen to sleep poorly during a full moon, the experience stands out. The mind begins to link the two events. This does not mean the moon actually caused the restless night. Instead, the expectation itself draws attention to the experience. The brain remembers the coincidence more easily because it fits the belief. Another psychological factor involves memory bias. Human memory is not a perfect record of events. Instead, it tends to highlight moments that feel unusual, emotional, or visually striking. The full moon is exactly that kind of event. A bright full moon can make the night sky look different. It casts shadows and brightens the landscape. If someone wakes during the night and notices the glowing moon outside the window, the moment becomes memorable. Later, if they recall that night as restless or unusual, the moon may seem like the obvious explanation. Meanwhile, many nights of poor sleep that occur during other lunar phases are simply forgotten. Without a visible event in the sky, those nights fade from memory more easily. This pattern can slowly reinforce the belief that the moon influences sleep. Scientists have studied this phenomenon carefully. When large amounts of data are examined, the expected patterns often disappear. Many controlled studies comparing sleep during different lunar phases find little or no consistent difference. Participants often sleep the same amount regardless of whether the moon is full, crescent, or invisible in the sky. When small differences do appear, they are usually very subtle. The changes may involve only a few minutes of sleep timing, or slight variations in sleep stages. These differences are often difficult to separate from normal day-to-day variation. Because of this, researchers generally conclude that strong behavioral effects from the full moon are unlikely. However, the moon's visibility still matters. When something bright and unusual appears in the sky, it naturally captures human attention. The full moon can make the night feel special or different. This emotional response can shape how people remember the night. Psychology, therefore, helps explain why the full moon remains such a powerful symbol in human culture. Even if its direct biological influence is small, its visual presence makes it easy to associate with meaningful experiences. The moon becomes part of the story people tell themselves about the night. Yet beyond folklore and memory, the moon does still change the physical environment in subtle ways. Its light alters the brightness of the landscape. Shadows stretch across the ground, and the world takes on a pale, silvery tone. These quiet changes shape how the night looks and feels beneath the lunar sky. When the moon rises high into the sky, the night landscape begins to change. The transformation is quiet and gradual. At first, the darkness remains deep, and only the brightest objects can be seen clearly. But as the eyes adjust and the moon climbs higher, shapes begin to emerge from the shadows. Trees gain outlines. Hills form soft silhouettes against the sky. Paths and fields slowly become visible again. Moonlight does not illuminate the world the way sunlight does. During the day, sunlight fills the landscape with bright color and strong contrast. Shadows are sharp, and details are easy to see. Under moonlight, everything becomes softer. The world appears mostly in shades of gray. This happens because the human eye uses different visual systems depending on how bright the environment is. In daylight, cone cells in the retina detect color and fine detail. But in low light, the eye relies more on rod cells. Rod cells are extremely sensitive to faint light, but they do not detect color well. As a result, moonlit landscapes often appear almost colorless. Greens, reds, and blues fade into muted tones. The environment looks more like a gentle grayscale painting than a vivid daytime scene. Even so, the human eye adapts remarkably well to darkness. After spending several minutes in a dim environment, the pupils widen and the retina becomes more sensitive. This process is called dark adaptation. Once it occurs, even small amounts of light become easier to detect. Under a full moon, dark adapted eyes can see surprisingly well. People walking through open landscapes may be able to navigate fields, trails, or shorelines without artificial light. Objects that seemed invisible shortly after sunset gradually reappear as the eyes adjust to the lunar glow. Moonlight also creates shadows. These shadows are softer and less defined than those produced by the sun. Because moonlight is much weaker and scattered through the atmosphere, the edges of shadows appear blurred. They stretch gently across the ground, rather than forming sharp outlines. As the moon moves across the sky during the night, these shadows slowly shift position. The movement is slow enough that most people do not notice it moment by moment. But over the course of several hours, the direction of moonlit shadows can change significantly as the moon travels along its arc above the horizon. This motion adds a quiet sense of change to the nighttime environment. Moonlit landscapes can also feel larger and more open than completely dark ones. When the moon brightens the ground, the visible horizon expands. The eye can detect distant shapes and movement that would otherwise remain hidden. In forests, moonlight filters through branches and leaves, creating shifting patterns of pale light on the ground. In deserts or open plains, the glow can stretch across wide distances, revealing subtle textures in sand or grass. Near the ocean, moonlight reflects off the surface of the water, creating a long, shimmering path of light that moves with the waves. These changes affect how the night feels to those moving through it. Under bright moonlight, the environment may seem more active. People and animals can move with greater confidence when the ground is visible. The landscape feels less enclosed because the eye can see farther. During moonless nights, the opposite often occurs. Without the moon's glow, the darkness becomes deeper. The horizon fades from view, and the world shrinks to whatever can be seen within a small range of vision. Movement slows, and the environment feels quieter. This difference in brightness can shape the atmosphere of the night. Even when the physical light level remains low, the change between a bright lunar night and a moonless one can be noticeable. The moon gently shifts how the landscape appears and how people experience the environment around them. These subtle changes help explain why moonlit nights have captured human attention for so long. The moon does not dramatically transform the night, but it alters it just enough to make the world feel different. The landscape becomes visible in soft shades, and the quiet glow spreads across the ground. Within this environment, human sleep unfolds against a sky that slowly brightens and darkens with the rhythm of the lunar cycle. The moon does not simply appear and disappear each night. Its timing in the sky slowly shifts across the month, creating a repeating pattern that changes when moonlight reaches the evening hours. This timing plays an important role in how bright the early night becomes. At the beginning of the lunar cycle, during the new moon phase, the moon rises and sets close to the sun. Because the illuminated side of the moon faces away from Earth during this phase, the moon is usually invisible in the night sky. As the days pass, the moon begins to drift away from the sun's position in the sky. Each evening, it rises a little later than the night before. On average, the moon rises about 50 minutes later each day. This gradual shift is caused by the moon's orbit around Earth, which slowly moves its position relative to the sun. As the lunar cycle progresses, the moon becomes visible shortly after sunset. During the waxing crescent phase, the moon appears low in the western sky during the early evening. It does not remain in the sky very long, setting a few hours after the sun. The light it provides during this time is gentle and brief. A few days later, the moon reaches the first quarter phase. Now it rises around midday and becomes clearly visible in the evening sky. At this stage, the moon remains above the horizon until around midnight. Its brightness grows stronger as more of its sunlit surface becomes visible from Earth. The nights grow gradually brighter as the moon continues toward the full phase. This period is known as the waxing gibbous phase. The moon now rises during the afternoon and is already high in the sky when darkness arrives. Evening landscapes may begin to feel noticeably brighter because moonlight is present soon after sunset. The brightest evenings occur during the full moon. A full moon rises at roughly the same time the sun sets. As the sun disappears below the horizon, the moon climbs upward in the opposite direction. Because its entire visible face reflects sunlight, it becomes the brightest object in the night sky. During these nights, moonlight can illuminate the environment for the entire evening. Fields, hills, forests, and shorelines can remain visible long after sunset. In places without artificial lighting, the difference between a full moon evening and a moonless one can be quite noticeable. People walking outdoors may find that they can move around more easily without lamps or flashlights. Paths remain visible, and the horizon can still be seen even after darkness settles. After the full moon passes, the moon begins rising later in the night. During the waning gibbous phase, moonrise occurs well after sunset. The moon may not appear until late evening or even after midnight. As a result, early evening hours become darker again. This pattern continues through the last quarter and waning crescent phases. By the end of the lunar cycle, the moon rises only during the early morning hours before sunrise. The evening sky returns to deeper darkness until the next cycle begins. Because of this shifting schedule, the brightness of evening hours changes throughout the month. The nights surrounding the full moon provide the most moonlight during the early evening. Nights near the new moon remain much darker at that time. This gradual shift in brightness repeats roughly every 29.5 days as the lunar cycle continues. For people living in environments with little artificial lighting, this pattern can subtly shape evening routines. Brighter nights may encourage people to remain active outdoors a little longer. Conversations, work, or travel may extend slightly when the ground remains visible under moonlight. These small shifts in evening activity can gently influence when people eventually settle down for sleep. The change is usually modest, but the repeating rhythm of moonrise means that the pattern returns month after month across the years. If the moon influences human sleep at all, the effect appears to be small. Unlike the strong signals created by daylight and artificial lighting, moonlight is gentle and subtle. Its brightness changes slowly across the lunar cycle, and the difference between phases is measured in fractions of a lux rather than large jumps in illumination. Because of this, any influence on sleep is expected to be modest. Some scientific studies have reported small shifts in sleep timing that appear to coincide with the lunar cycle. In certain experiments, participants took slightly longer to fall asleep during nights near the full moon. The difference was often measured in minutes rather than hours. In one frequently discussed laboratory study, researchers observed that participants took about 5 minutes longer on average to fall asleep during nights close to the full moon. In addition, deep sleep stages were slightly reduced compared with other parts of the lunar cycle. The total amount of sleep also appeared to decrease slightly. In that study, participants slept roughly 20 minutes less during nights near the full moon. Brain recordings suggested that deep slow-wave sleep, which helps restore the body, may have been slightly lower as well. These findings attracted attention because the participants were sleeping in a controlled laboratory environment. They did not have windows showing the night sky, and they were not aware of the moon's phase during the experiment. This raised the possibility that the human body might somehow be responding to a subtle environmental rhythm. However, many other studies have not found the same pattern. Researchers examining larger groups of people or analyzing long periods of sleep data often fail to detect any consistent difference across the lunar cycle. In many cases, sleep timing appears essentially the same whether the moon is full, crescent, or invisible in the sky. This inconsistency has led scientists to treat the lunar sleep effect with caution. If the moon does influence sleep, the signal is likely very small. Human sleep naturally varies from night to night due to many factors. Stress, work schedules, social activities, exercise, diet, and exposure to screens can all influence when people fall asleep and how deeply they rest. These everyday influences are often much stronger than any change produced by moonlight. For example, staying up slightly later to watch television or use a smartphone can delay sleep far more than the few minutes that lunar studies sometimes report. Caffeine, travel, or changes in daily routine can also shift sleep timing in noticeable ways. Because sleep varies so much naturally, detecting a lunar signal becomes extremely challenging. Scientists studying sleep must often analyze thousands of nights of data before subtle trends become visible. Even then, the results may differ depending on where participants live and how much natural light reaches their environment. Environmental context appears to play an important role. In cities filled with artificial lighting, moonlight rarely changes the brightness of the night in a meaningful way. Street lights, building lights, and electronic screens produce far stronger signals that dominate the circadian system. In such environments, the lunar cycle may have almost no measurable influence on sleep. In contrast, people living in darker environments may experience clearer lunar signals. In rural areas, wilderness regions, or communities without widespread electricity, moonlight can noticeably brighten the night during certain phases. When the full moon rises early in the evening, outdoor activity may continue slightly longer because the environment remains visible. That small extension of evening activity could delay bedtime by a short amount of time. If this happens repeatedly across many months and years, the pattern may become detectable in sleep studies conducted in low-light environments. Even so, the overall effect remains subtle. Most researchers agree that the moon does not dramatically control human sleep. Instead, it may act as one small environmental factor among many. Its influence, if present at all, is gentle and easily overshadowed by stronger sources of light and behavior. In the end, the moon's connection to sleep appears to be more of a quiet background rhythm than a powerful force. For most of human history, the night sky looked very different from what many people see today. After sunset, darkness spread quickly across the land. Without electric lighting, the world grew quiet and dim. The brightest objects in the sky were the stars, the planets, and the moon itself. In that environment, the moon's presence could be easy to notice. When the moon was full, the ground beneath it became softly illuminated. Landscapes gained gentle visibility, and shadows stretched faintly across fields and hills. When the moon disappeared during the new moon phase, the night returned to deeper darkness. These changes repeated every month. But the modern world has transformed the night. Electric lighting now fills many parts of the planet with brightness long after sunset. Cities glow from streetlights, buildings, and traffic. Highways shine with rows of lamps, and homes remain illuminated by indoor lighting and electronic screens. This widespread illumination creates what scientists call light pollution. Light pollution occurs when artificial light brightens the night sky beyond its natural level. In many urban areas, the glow of city lights reflects off clouds and dust in the atmosphere. The result is a bright haze that spreads across the sky, often hiding faint stars and softening the contrast between lunar phases. In such environments, the moon's natural brightness can become difficult to notice. A full moon that once illuminated landscapes may now appear only slightly brighter than the already glowing sky. The difference between a moonlit night and a moonless one may be almost invisible within the constant glow of artificial light. For people living in large cities, the lunar cycle often fades into the background. Many urban residents rarely notice when the moon is full or when it has vanished from the sky. Indoor lighting and digital screens dominate the evening environment, shaping sleep schedules far more strongly than the moon ever could. This shift has changed how humans experience the night. The circadian rhythm evolved under conditions where darkness was a powerful signal. As sunlight faded, the environment gradually dimmed, allowing the body to produce melatonin and prepare for sleep. Artificial lighting has disrupted that natural pattern. Even moderate indoor lighting can delay the rise of melatonin, and bright screens can extend wakefulness long after sunset. These modern influences are far stronger than the gentle glow of moonlight. As a result, the moon's role in shaping sleep has likely diminished for many people. However, the moon has not disappeared entirely from human experience. Outside of cities, large regions of the world still experience relatively dark nights. Rural communities, deserts, forests, and oceans often remain free from heavy light pollution. In these environments, the lunar cycle can still transform the appearance of the night. A full moon rising over an open landscape can brighten the ground and reveal distant shapes that would otherwise remain hidden. Campers, hikers, and sailors often notice how moonlight can guide movement across dark terrain or open water. In places where artificial lighting is minimal, the difference between lunar phases can still feel striking. These experiences offer a glimpse into how humans once lived with the moon as a regular companion of the night. Even in modern societies, some people remain more aware of lunar rhythms. Astronomers, farmers, fishermen, and outdoor workers often pay attention to the moon's phases because they affect visibility and environmental conditions. Yet for most urban residents, the moon now plays a much quieter role. Human sleep today is influenced by many competing factors. Work schedules, social habits, technology, travel, and artificial lighting all shape how people rest and wake. Within this complex environment, the moon is only one small piece of the larger picture. Its cycle continues faithfully in the sky above, but its influence often blends into the background of modern life. When scientists look at all the evidence together, the moon's influence on human sleep appears gentle rather than dramatic. The moon reliably changes one simple feature of the night environment: brightness. As its phases shift across the lunar month, the amount of light in the sky slowly rises and falls. A thin crescent produces only a faint glow, while a full moon can brighten landscapes with a soft silver light. This change happens every month with remarkable consistency. From a scientific perspective, this matters because human biology is sensitive to light. The circadian system, which helps regulate sleep and wakefulness, responds strongly to changes in brightness. Light entering the eyes sends signals to the brain that help determine whether the body should remain alert or begin preparing for rest. During the day, bright sunlight keeps the circadian system active. At night, darkness allows melatonin to rise, encouraging the body to move towards sleep. This daily cycle is one of the most important rhythms guiding human health and behavior. Moonlight is much weaker than sunlight, but it still belongs to the same environmental system. When the moon brightens the night sky, the environment becomes slightly less dark than it would otherwise be. For most people today, this difference is small because artificial lighting is already present. But in darker settings, moonlight can still stand out. Fields, forests, and coastlines can become noticeably brighter during the full moon. The landscape becomes visible again in gentle shades of grey. In such environments, the lunar cycle quietly changes how the night feels from one week to the next. Because the human circadian system responds to light, researchers have wondered whether these changes might influence sleep timing. Some studies suggest that people may take slightly longer to fall asleep near the full moon, or sleep a little less during those nights. Other studies find no consistent difference at all. When effects are detected, they are usually small. Often, the change amounts to only a few minutes. These subtle differences highlight an important point about sleep. Human sleep is shaped by many influences working together. Light exposure, daily routines, physical activity, stress, and social schedules all play a role in determining when people become tired and when they wake. Within this complex system, moonlight is only one environmental signal among many. In modern environments filled with electric lighting, the moon's signal may be easily overshadowed. Bright indoor lights and glowing screens can suppress melatonin far more strongly than moonlight ever could. For many people living in cities, the lunar cycle may have almost no measurable influence on sleep. Yet the moon remains part of the nighttime environment. Its phases continue to repeat month after month. Even when its effect is subtle, it still alters the brightness of the sky and the appearance of the landscape. In darker regions of the world, these changes may still be noticeable. People spending time outdoors in rural areas, deserts, or wilderness often observe how dramatically moonlight can transform the night. The ground becomes visible again, shadows stretch across the terrain, and the horizon expands under the pale glow of the full moon. These experiences connect modern humans with a much older relationship between people and the natural sky. For most of our species' history, humans lived under conditions where the sun, the moon, and the stars were the primary sources of light. Sleep patterns evolved within that environment, shaped by rhythms that repeated every day and every month. The moon's influence on sleep may therefore be quiet rather than powerful. It does not command the body to sleep or wake. Instead, it gently alters the conditions of the night, adding a subtle rhythm to the environment in which sleep takes place. Even when unnoticed, that rhythm continues its steady cycle above the Earth. High above Earth, the moon continues its steady journey around our planet. It does not shine with its own light. Instead, it reflects sunlight back toward Earth, turning the darkness of space into a soft glow that reaches the ground below. Night after night, its shape slowly changes as different portions of its surface become visible. This cycle repeats every 29.5 days. The crescent grows, the full moon brightens the sky, and then the light fades again as the moon returns to darkness. For as long as humans have existed, this quiet rhythm has unfolded above every landscape on Earth. Long before cities, electricity, or modern technology, people lived beneath these repeating patterns. The sun guided the day, darkness marked the arrival of night, and the moon slowly changed the brightness of the sky from one evening to the next. Some nights were deeply dark, while others glowed softly under the full moon. Human sleep evolved within this environment. Our bodies learned to respond to the rising and fading of light. The circadian rhythm grew sensitive to brightness, helping guide when we feel alert and when we feel ready to rest. Even the smallest signals from the sky became part of the natural world surrounding sleep. The moon was one of those signals. Its influence on human sleep appears subtle. Scientific studies suggest that if the moon changes sleep timing at all, the effect is small and often difficult to measure. Artificial lighting in the modern world now plays a far larger role in shaping how and when people sleep. Yet the moon's presence has never disappeared. Each month it returns to the sky, brightening the night for a few evenings before fading again into darkness. In places far from city lights, its glow can still transform the landscape, revealing hills, trees, and distant horizons under a pale silver light. Even when people are indoors, the moon continues its quiet orbit above. It pulls gently on Earth's oceans, guiding the tides. It helps stabilize the tilt of our planet, supporting the steady rhythm of the seasons. And every night, it reflects sunlight back toward the surface of the world. For animals moving through forests, deserts, and oceans, moonlight still shapes the patterns of the night. Predators hunt beneath its glow. Prey animals move more cautiously when the sky grows bright. Coral reefs release new life into the ocean according to lunar cycles that have repeated for millions of years. Across the natural world, the moon remains part of the quiet background rhythm of life. For humans, its influence may be softer than the stories and myths that once surrounded it, but its presence still reminds us of something simple. The night sky is not empty. Above the sleeping world, the moon continues its slow and reliable path through space, returning again and again to brighten the darkness for a little while. And somewhere beneath that gentle light, the world grows quiet, the body relaxes, and sleep slowly arrives.